Okay. Um, all right. So I want to discuss the question is like whether the war between Israel and Hamas and then the aftermath, whether that has changed the American Jewish community uh, permanently. And first of all, let me say that you know permanent is a long time. But I do think that that there are some indications that really something may have changed very, very fundamentally. And I will tell you that I have had a number of um, conversations in the last couple of years with congregants who say that they can't talk to their kids or they can't talk to their grandkids about Israel. That whenever they, have these discussions, um, beyond like not even being able to understand each other or talking past each other, um, there's so much anger that it becomes really, really hard to even have like a civil discussion. So so they come to me, with concerns, and come they come to me for advice. And so things have definitely uh changed. And I think also that there has been a kind of a polarization in the American Jewish community, um, where um, like people really like, I'm not sure even how to put it. It's just that like empathy for so many people, empathy is a zero sum game. And like if there are people, particularly younger but not exclusively younger, that if a rabbi expresses any sympathy or concern or support for Israel, then um, people will just write them off. And conversely, if a rabbi expresses any sort of empathy or concern for Palestinians, other congregants will write them off. Um, so you might think, so let's just sort of have a kind of truce, and we won't talk about this stuff at all. But that doesn't work either, because I can tell you that rabbis will get criticized. Oh, and I've gotten it. I wouldn't say criticism, but feedback. Particularly towards the beginning of the war, from congregants who said, we always say a prayer for Israel, but what about concern for innocent Palestinians who are being killed? Right. And I said, do I, ever indicated that I don't care about that? But I had to, change, if not the prayers, then the introduction to the prayer, so that there is this real sense of polarization. And it's certainly not everybody, but it's enough that it makes conversation difficult and makes the situation difficult. Um, but um, and that's just sort of like impressions. But we have data too. Um, and but one of the things that the data shows is that, contrary to this polarization that I think is really pushed by only a small percentage of members of the community, that real out there feelings are much more complex and much more mixed. That when you get to real people, people are not either 100% pro-Israel and not at all concerned about Palestinians, or 100% pro-Palestinian and not concerned about Israel. That, but having said that, there are also generational divides as well as political divides. So uh, uh, earlier this month, the Washington Post had a series of articles on a survey of American Jewish opinion. The survey was actually taken in September, but wasn't published until October. And I know enough about demographics that, when I look at the raw data, I mean, I'm not an expert, but it's a good poll. Okay, it's very, very hard to say that any poll is going to be like 100% accurate. I mean, first of all, you get sampling error. And especially, I mean, the Jewish population is not that large, and therefore the absolute number of people sampled is not that large. Um, but I think it's a quality poll. Okay. Um, Now, but when we talk about split and polarization, all right. So the first question that was asked is, do you approve or disapprove of Israel's military actions in Gaza? Okay, and 46% approved and 48% disapproved. Okay, so that's as close to a split right down the middle as you can possibly get. Although um, I'm not sure how I would answer it, right? Because um, and when there were follow-up questions, a lot of people who said disapprove say, well, what Israel did right after October 7th, I supported that. It was necessary. Israel had a an obligation to respond, to defend its citizenship, its citizens, right? But as the war went on, I was less able to support what they were doing. Um, and I think, certainly, I mean, that describes me, right? I mean, there's no question that in my mind, that had Israel not responded at all after October 7th, situation would have gotten much worse. Um, but at a certain point, enough. I mean, Hamas had been never going to 100% eliminate Hamas, right? But it had been really destroyed as a military threat. And, pretty much everybody I know in Israel believes that Netanyahu kept the war going far beyond military necessity for his own political necessity, right? So when you say, do you support or oppose? The answer is I support and I oppose, because what is the context? But um, now here is a statistic that I found surprising. Okay. Um, 61% of American Jews, again, according to this survey, right? I mean, other surveys might give you different results, but 61% of American Jews believe Israel has committed war crimes against Palestinians, right? 61% of American Jews believe Israel committed war crimes in the recent war, and 39% believe that Israel is guilty of genocide. Um, I find those numbers higher than I would have expected. Um, and, particularly since, um, if all you're seeing is press releases from mainstream American Jewish organizations, right? That anybody who says Israel has committed genocide is an anti-Semite, which therefore makes 39% of American Jews anti-Semites, which I think is kind of hard to maintain with a straight face, and even the question of war crimes. And I have to say that that's kind of where I fall. War crimes, yes. Genocide, no. I mean, because words have meanings, but but um, but I think Israel's conduct, or the Israeli government's conduct in the last war, it is troubling. But so at the same time, and again, this is, I mean, you could say that the data is nuanced, or you could say that the data is incoherent, I suppose, right? Because you have, all right, 61% of American Jews believe Israel committed war crimes, 39% believe Israel committed genocide, but 68% say that Hamas has the majority of blame for civilian deaths in Gaza. Okay, which again, I mean, that's my personal belief. I mean, had Hamas not launched its attack on October 7th, none of this would have happened, right? So I think Hamas does have the lion's share of the blame, but so 68% blame primarily Hamas, but 32% of American Jews blame primarily Israel. Okay, but nevertheless, a majority, and a clear majority, 59% of American Jews continue to support U.S. military aid to Israel in its fight against Hamas. Okay, so this is, like I say, I mean, again, you could call the data nuanced, or you could call it incoherent. I mean, I personally think it's nuanced, but it does give a lie, I think, to the narrative, or the experience, really, of polarization. Um, but now, when you get down a little further, there is definitely a generational divide. Okay, um, the younger an American Jew is, the more likely they are to be critical of Israeli policies. Okay, so that 68% of Jews over 65 feel emotionally attached to Israel. When you get to those aged 18 to 34, it's 36%. Okay, right? So 68% of Jews over 65 emotionally attached to Israel, 36% of Jews aged 18 to 34. Um, and um, On the genocide question, has Israel committed genocide? 50% of Jews 34 or under say Israel has committed genocide, but only 30% of Jews older than 34. So a very stark generational divide on the genocide issue. Um, and there's also a divide in terms, I mean, your American political orientation um, is indicative also of a divide vis-a-vis views of Israel. Um, More than 8 in 10 of Jewish Republicans approved Israel's military actions in Gaza, but only about 3 in 10 Jewish Democrats shared that view. Um, that math to me seems a little fuzzy because um, you have um, well, not real. I mean, 46 approve, 48% disapprove. Yeah, I guess it could work because I mean the data doesn't dig that deep, but still, 75 to 80% of American Jews are Democrats. So, if you have sort of almost unanimous support among Republicans and only 30% among Democrats, that could give you a almost 50-50 split. Um, but there are also differences by education and by gender. Okay. 54% of Jews who have some college but not a college degree approve of Israel's actions in Gaza. All right. 54% of Jews who went to college but did not graduate approve of Israel's actions in Gaza, but 36%, only 36% of Jews with a graduate degree. Okay, so the more higher education you have, the less supportive of Israel's actions in Gaza you are likely to be. But there's also, perhaps not surprisingly, a gender gap, right? 56% of men approve of Israel's actions, 55% of women disapprove. Okay. I mean, but we know that women tend to be more liberal and more dovish. Um, but views of Netanyahu. Um, 68% of American Jews have a negative view of Netanyahu's leadership, which is a 20 percentage point increase from 5 years earlier. Okay, 68%. 59% of American Jews still believe that a two-state solution is possible, that there could be Israel and an independent Palestinian state coexisting peacefully. But this view is influenced by whether you approve or disapprove of Israel's actions. In a different survey, one taken a year earlier by the American Jewish Committee, 57% of American Jews felt more connected to Israel after October 7th. And I would be interested to see if that survey were retaken now, whether that number would have gone down. I suspect it would have. But a majority believe, a majority of American Jews believe that they are less safe as a Jewish person in the United States after October 7th. Um, and so why don't I stop here for a second? And if there are any questions or comments or discussion on the information that I just presented.
I was just wondering how it's affected Jews wanting to move to Israel now. It's because many Jews have been gone to volunteer.
Right. I haven't seen any data on that. Um, I think I haven't seen any data. I mean, and
Mhm.
I haven't even, frankly, even like personal anecdotal impressions. And for a couple of reasons. One is that the absolute numbers are so small. Um, and the other is that for American Jews in particular, I mean, historically, and I've seen nothing to change my impression on this. 80% of American Jews who make Aliyah eventually come back. Um,
Hmm.
so I'm not sure that there's like, hmm?
No, I just said I didn't realize that.
Yeah, no, it's a
Yeah.
it's a huge it's a huge percentage because um there are two motivators for Aliyah, right? There's the push and the pull, right? The pull meaning, you know, for whatever reason, and it could be, all different motivations, a desire to live in Israel, right? Whereas the push is like life in where I'm living now is untenable, right? And so, historically, most of the Jews who have made Aliyah, it's more been a push than a pull, right? I mean, um, when Jews were fleeing from Germany, right, before the Holocaust, I mean, I mean, many Jews from Germany lived in Israel 50 years and never learned Hebrew and never really acclimated.
Hmm.
Um, you know, um, or if you look even at, um, when the Jews left Morocco in the late 40s, early 50s, right? Um, the educated and better off Jews from Morocco went to France. The poorer and
Hmm.
less educated went to Israel, right? Or if I know I've spoken about this in a couple of sermons and classes. My relatives who they survived the Holocaust in Lithuania, and after the Holocaust went to live in France. Um, and then after 15, 20 years in France, moved to Israel. Um, and it wasn't because they were such strong Zionists. It was because they felt that the anti-Semitism in France was so strong that they had no future there.
Hmm.
Um, and it's still, I mean, Jews who are moving to Israel, again, from France in particular. right? It's not so much that they
Yeah.
all of a sudden had a
Mm.
Zionist awakening. It's the anti-Semitism in France,
Mm. And what about
where,
here? That that
yeah,
might
but
start a
but
bigger movement.
well, possibly, right? Possibly. I mean, um, look, 5 years ago, if you had said what you just said, I would have said you are paranoid or nuts. Um, I don't say that anymore.
I
Okay,
know.
but
Yeah.
I do think that there is a difference between vandalism and even occasional things worse than vandalism, right? Like the Tree of Life, or the Tree of Life in particular. Um, whereas even what happened at the Jewish Museum back in the spring, that really was connected to Israel. It doesn't make it okay, but it wasn't really anti-Semitism in the same way that Tree of Life was,
Mhm.
right? Where that guy wanted to kill Jews, right? At the Jewish Museum here, it was. Now, we don't know whether the shooter actually knew that the people he shot were people who worked at the Israeli embassy, right? Because it seemed to be he just shot the first two people that came out the door when he, opened fire. But I mean, it was an Israel related event. Okay. So, um, but I don't, I mean, certainly hard to say that Jewish life in the United States has become untenable, right? And I can't imagine that it would become untenable. Um, uh, and if it is, I think it complicated, right? Because well, I'll get there in a second, but I do think so that if you're coming from the United States, right, and you move to Israel and it doesn't work out, you can come back, right?
Right.
If you know the Jews who left Germany, right, no possibility of coming back, right? And so, or the Jews who left Morocco or Ethiopia or Yemen or wherever. So it's a very different phenomenon. So, like, historically, and this goes way, way back because I actually wrote my master's thesis about Hashomer Tzair in North America, um, which was the one Zionist youth movement that always pushed Aliyah. Um, and even people from Hashomer Tzair made Aliyah.
Mm.
Huge percentage of them eventually came back. Um, so so it's a different phenomenon, but it's a long answer. But I haven't seen any data. I mean, I'm sure data is out there somewhere. I just wouldn't even know. I wouldn't even know where to look. Um, all right. Um, so um, I might have thought that after um, the ceasefire, technically it's not even a ceasefire, right? It's like the war is over, supposedly. Um, that things might have cooled off a little bit in terms of the um, polarization within the American Jewish community, um, but clearly not so. And that is focusing around, particularly very much so the mayoral election in New York City.
Mhm.
And um, so this past Shabbat, Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove, who is the rabbi of the Park Avenue Synagogue, and certainly I think the the most prominent conservative pulpit rabbi in the country right now. David Wolpe in Los Angeles retired a couple of years ago, and I think Elliot Cosgrove has replaced him as the most prominent conservative pulpit rabbi, and a very smart, very serious guy, and someone whom I agree with more often than not. Um, but he gave a sermon, um, basically saying that Zoran Mamdani is a threat to the safety and well-being of the Jewish community in New York City, and all Jews should vote against him. And that was followed. So you may have seen, I don't know, but there a letter, an open letter, has been circulating um, for rabbis to sign on to, and the letter says, we Jews, we have to stand against any candidate who normalizes anti-Zionism or anti-Semitism, but the only candidate it mentions is Mamdani. Um, and um, it's being presented. I mean, I saw a headline. I mean, the number of signatories are up to about 1,000 right now. And the headline says, 1,000 New York rabbis sign open letter against Mamdani, which is not true. Only, I mean, the signatories are grouped, and all of the New York rabbis are at the front. There are 140 rabbis from New York State, of whom not all of them are in New York City, and then the rest of the signatories are from all over. Um, and but there's a lot of, I mean, it's become a polarizing issue.
Yeah.
Okay. I am seeing this argument on two very different rabbinic listservs simultaneously. One is the listserv for the Washington Board of Rabbis, because any member of the Board of Rabbis can send whatever they want to the listserv, and it's usually just informational, right? It's like, here's a statement you may want to sign. And then if people don't want to sign, they just don't sign. But there's not a lot of like, oh no, I don't agree with this. I mean, and personally, I think I have a limited tolerance for political back and forth on listservs like that, because I think it usually sheds more heat than light, and it also decreases the usefulness of the listserv because people stop reading it. But so there has been now for about 2 days constant back and forth. on the Board of Rabbis listserv about this open letter. And simultaneously, there's discussion on the listserv of Truah, which is the rabbinic human rights organization, because some rabbis who are members of Truah have also signed this letter. And I have not. I have to tell you that, I grew up in the New York area. I lived in the city of New York until I was 8. I was born in Brooklyn. Both my parents were born in Brooklyn. My dad lived in the New York area almost all of his life, although not in New York City all of his life. And my mom, she moved to Florida after she retired. So, but I don't, so I don't live in New York. I have some cousins still in New York, but that's it. My brother lives in New Jersey, although he works in Manhattan. So I don't follow the New York mayoral election that closely. Mamdani would not have been my first choice in the Democratic primary. And in all honesty, if I lived in New York now, I don't know what I would do. I could not possibly see myself voting for either Cuomo or Sliwa. So I would either vote for Mamdani or not vote at all. I'm honestly not sure, and I don't really have to have. I don't really have to have an answer to that because it's a theoretical question. I find Mamdani's positions on Israel to be not my own. Let's put it that way. But also, I do think, look, I think a lot of people who say, oh, I'm not an anti Semite, I'm just an anti Zionist, it's BS. I think you can be an anti Zionist without being an anti Semite. And I don't think Mamdani is an anti-Semite. When people say, well, I think he has been insensitive and sometimes obtuse. It took a long time for him finally to listen to his own Jewish supporters who said, you have to stop using this phrase globalize the intifada. Because it may mean one thing to you, but when Jews hear globalize the intifada, they hear attack Jews, attack synagogues. Okay. Um, so I think he has been insensitive at times, but also when he says that he, will fight hate crimes against anybody who is a victim of hate crimes, when he says he wants to increase eightfold the city's budget for fighting hate crimes, when he says he wants to keep Jessica Tisch as the police commissioner, who is not only Jewish, but the daughter-in-law of a Kehilat Shalom member. I don't know if you know, Jessica Tisch, who is the police commissioner in New York, is Alan Levine's daughter-in-law.
No
Yeah. Um, and so I don't think he's an anti-Semite, and I think a lot of the fear is sort of um, disproportionate. I mean, and frankly, uh, you know, if you and the fact that I mean, if the statement had called out Mamdani, but also called out the white nationalists and the Christian nationalists on the right side of the spectrum, I might have I would have given more consideration to possibly signing it, right? But when you say, well, we're against anti-Semitism, blah, 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 on all sides, but the only person you actually mention is Mamdani, and to me, even if and I do think that a lot of the people who um, signed it in good faith. But to me, this is just an attempt um, to enlist Jewish support for people that I don't support.
Mm.
Put it that way.
But Heat Mamdani got the approval of the governor of New York. So that made me think maybe she knows something we don't know about,
Well,
the
yeah, I
fact
mean, it
that
took
he'll be effective for the whole
right.
city.
Well, it took her a long time, but here's
Yeah.
right. So, but here's the thing. Okay, um, so there, so Fox News did a poll last week of Jewish New Yorkers. Okay, now
Hmm.
again, so I mean, Fox, when they do news, their news is actually okay. It's their commentary that's not right, but um, so Cuomo and Mamdani are almost neck and neck for the Jewish vote in New York right now. Okay, Cuomo has 42%, Mamdani has 38%, and Sliwa has 13%. Okay, so but again, it's like the young, and Mamdani has a clear majority of young Jews, not only like now that he's the nominee, but even for the primary. Mamdani had a majority, or certainly a plurality of young Jews in the primary, right? So um, it's I mean, but to me, so let me cut to the chase. I mean, I think that um, like I say, the views that people hold are much more complicated and much more nuanced than with a lot of shades of gray. Than and but um, and look, I mean, you heard my sermons on Rosh Hashanah, right? I mean, I think that look, I am very, very definitely a Zionist. And I think that Jews who are anti-Zionist fundamentally misunderstand what being a Jew is and what Jewish history teaches us. Um, but I also think, I mean, in reading some of this debate that's going on right now, that a lot of, I mean, here's the problem. I mean, the word Zionism is such an amorphous word, right? I mean, again, as somebody, I mean, I wrote my master's thesis on a topic in American Zionist history, right? And prior to 1948, a Zionist meant you wanted to live in Israel and thought that all Jews should go live in Israel, right? If you ask most American Jews of our generation today, are you a Zionist? They would say yes.
Mhm.
You ask them, do you want to live in Israel? No. Do you think all Jews should live in Israel? No. Do you want your kids to live in Israel? No. Right? So what does Zionism mean? So I understand Zionism today to mean I support Israel's right to exist as a state for the Jewish people. But not everybody defines Zionism that way. So a lot of young Jews who say that they're anti-Zionist, I would describe them not as anti-Zionist, but maybe as non-Zionist, right? As you know, ambivalent towards it. But but having said that, I mean, look, I think if you are going to tell New York Jews who vote for Mamdani that they are bad Jews, you are winding up telling close to half of the Jews in New York City that they're bad Jews. And I don't think that that helps anybody. Um, if you're going to tell Jews throughout the country, well, if you think Israel committed war crimes, you're a bad Jew, you've told the majority of American Jews that they're bad Jews, right? If you tell Jews who think that Israel committed genocide, which I do not think, by the way, but um, if you tell that Jews who think that Israel did commit genocide, that you're a bad Jew, you've told over 40% of American Jews that they're bad Jews. That I think we have to have a much larger tent and a much broader tolerance for diversity of views, even if they're views that I, not only disagree with, but but heartily like reject. And so I came across, as I was doing some research for tonight, an article by a guy I'd never heard of before. His name is Samuel Abrams. He's a non-resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Okay, American Enterprise Institute is a right-wing think tank, but like a respectable, like not crazy, not hard right. Um, but he's a political scientist, and he writes. I mean, and he's not sympathetic to what the perspective that he's describing, but he says many progressive Jewish students are reinterpreting what it means to be Jewish. Traditional practices, historical beliefs, and faith-based ideas and traditions are being hollowed out. All right, so I don't like that term, for a more general humanistic worldview. But here's what he doesn't like, and I actually do like. It says for young progressive Jews, their identity is now defined less by faith and traditional Jewish practices or solidarity with state of Israel, but more by universal ethics, justice, and opposition to oppression wherever it occurs. Mamdani's domestic platform is firmly rooted in principles of economic and racial equity. These values resonate with younger Jews who now interpret tikkun olam, the Jewish
Mm.
obligation to repair the world through a social justice lens, in this framework, opposing systemic injustice is not just permitted by Judaism, it demands this. Okay. And then he says that this is a shallow and ignorant interpretation of Judaism, but he says, nevertheless, um, we have to be aware that this is out there. Which I think, I mean, I don't think it's shallow and ignorant, quite the opposite. But to me, I think the bottom line, and I've said this for a while now, that if you tell particularly young American Jews that the price of admission to the Jewish community is checking your progressive ideals at the door, you're going to have a lot fewer Jews. And I think, I mean, not only is it wrong, even if it's not wrong, it's counterproductive. We are writing so many people. Again, it's not, our congregation, I mean, I wish I had to deal with trying to not alienate Jews in their 20s and 30s. I wish I had to deal with that.
Yeah.
I don't, but I think I don't know. So I do think that we have to have a tolerance for broader ideals. And I think, as much as I think, Rabbi Cosgrove is a smart guy, and I agree with him far more often than I disagree with him. I don't agree with him on this. Of course, I mean, I don't live in New York City, so, I might feel differently if this was like, at the top of my radar screen rather than just, one of many things I'm looking at. But I am concerned about, I think, the polarization it's not likely to decrease, and it may actually just get even worse. I'm not sure. I
Mhm.
mean, especially since, look, I mean, I'm not sure I see what the point of this open letter was, or of Cosgrove's sermon. I mean, I look, like him or dislike him, Mamdani's going to win. So, what is the point of alienating the guy before he's even taken office? I'm not sure I understand that. I think it's counterproductive. Anyway, um, I will shut up. And then, again, if there are questions or comments, please feel free to jump in.
Do you think that
Yeah, hold on.
reform?
Go ahead.
Rabbi, I
Oh, okay.
have
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
leave. I want to thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, sure. Of course. Thank you. Thanks for joining. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, of course. Thank you. You're very welcome. Thanks. Yeah, Toby, go ahead.
Do you think
Good
there's
night.
Good night.
any difference between how the reform movement is feeling about all this compared to the conservative? Because they're usually more liberal, I would say. And
Yeah, I mean, look, I mentioned Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove, but Rabbi Ami Hirsch, who's the rabbi of the Stephen Wise Free Synagogue, um, which is Reform, has also been, writing and talking about this. Now, Ami, on, uh, you know, I think he's not the mainstream of the Reform movement. But I have See, look, I think I'm I'm not sure. I mean, I suspect that look, it'd be interesting to see. I haven't seen any data. It would be
Mhm.
interesting. I mean, I will tell you that, look, I mean, historically, data has consistently shown when you compare conservative affiliated Jews to reform affiliated Jews, that conservative affiliated Jews are far more likely to have visited Israel, for one.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
and far more likely to belong to other Jewish organizations that are Israel focused, um, et cetera, et cetera. Um, there is also more political diversity, but I mean, not by that much. I mean, if you know, again, I'm not sure. I mean, so yes, I mean, there are more Republicans in conservative synagogues than in Reform synagogues, right? But most conservative Jews are still Democrats. Um, so and and in these debates that are going on, I mean, I have seen, Reform rabbis who have signed this letter and, written why they did and why everybody should, and
Mhm.
conservative rabbis who didn't sign. I mean, I didn't sign, but I'm not going to write anything about it because it's just not that important to me. Um, but so there are reform rabbis on both sides of this debate. There are conservative rabbis on both sides of this debate. Um, I will tell you that, so a couple of weeks ago on a Sunday afternoon, Mamdani spoke at a Reform synagogue in Brooklyn.
Oh.
Um, he was invited there by that rabbi. It was private. It was all, it said, I want you to meet our congregants and I want our congregants to meet you. Um, it upset a lot of people who belong to that synagogue. Okay. So, but on the other hand, Mamdani has also met with a lot of Hasidic groups. Um, and now, of course, a lot of Hasidim are not Zion. I mean, all Hasidim are not Zionist, but some, are pro-Israel but not Zionist. Some are very much anti-Israel.
Mhm.
Um, he just ran an open letter to the Hasidic community in Yiddish. I mean, obviously, he didn't. I don't. He had
He
somebody
knows all the
translate it for him. I
tricks.
don't think he knows Yiddish, but which is another, but so it's this is an issue that I think transcends and defies the more sort of stereotypical denominational breakdown. Um, the Mamdani thing is really fascinating. It really is. It is fascinating. And it'll be interesting to see after the election, what data there is on the Jewish vote. I mean, the other thing is, look, I mean, I mean, I think some of what's going on in New York with Cosgrove's sermon and this open letter and so on and so forth is to put pressure on Sliwa to drop out, right? Because I mean, nobody thinks Sliwa's going to win. I don't even think Sliwa thinks Sliwa's going to win, right? So the assumption that some people who oppose Mamdani are making is that if Sliwa drops out, everybody who would otherwise have voted for Sliwa will vote for Cuomo. And, I mean, most polls do show that Cuomo and Sliwa together outpoll Mamdani. Right now, that doesn't necessarily mean the assumption that everybody who is currently supporting Slima will vote for Cuomo. If that were the case, it would be much more of a horse race, right? So, part of this, I think, is trying to, pressure Sliwa to drop out to make it, much more of a horse race. And there's still, I mean, it's still not quite 2 weeks, but almost 2 weeks until election day. So, a lot could still happen. I don't know. I haven't had a chance. Yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No,
No,
I was gonna
it's
say
just,
I haven't had a chance to talk to my brother about this
okay,
election yet. Because as I say, I mean, he doesn't live in New York City, but he works in New York City. I'm sure he follows it a lot more
yeah.
closely than I do. But
Now, I understand that you went to the No Kings March
I did.
rally.
Yeah.
Because I went to the one in Germantown.
Yeah, no, I went to the one on corner of Montgomery Village and Frederick. I mean, I had to say, let me I don't don't need to record this.